In this video, I want to explain to you some of the most, the larger pieces of the map of the internal world based on yogis and Eastern philosophy as well as ancient psychology. So in the write-up, I illustrated that there's three main components that we have to understand first. There's the brain, which is like the organ in your head, the gray matter. So we could put that aside for now. And then there's your mind, which is kind of like all the invisible stuff that happens, the processing that happens in your brain. So that said, it's not limited to the area of your brain. There's also other areas of your being that's kind of incorporated in the functions of mind. Traditionally they talk about like DNA and some hormone production, things like that. That's kind of all encompassed within the mind, according to the East. And then beyond that, or more accurately, behind the mind, is your consciousness. And so your consciousness is your ability to direct. It is your focused attention. I implied that in a previous video where you have this spotlight. And so that is synonymous, close to synonymous with your consciousness. So my focus for this video is to understand the mind and its functions. According to Eastern philosophy, there are four essential functions of mind. There's four parts of the mind. There's first is manas. Manas is commonly called the monkey mind. And the monkey mind is the reins that are being held. So manas is the ability to control the senses, or it's your connection to the senses. And so the senses in the symbolism of the Gita are the horses. So the five cognitive senses are the ones that you know about very well: touch, hearing, taste, smell, and sight. There's other senses as well. They're called like the action senses. For our purposes, I think that just understanding that it is your connection with the senses is more than enough. Manas is commonly called like the lower mind. It doesn't really make decisions. It just takes information in and sends it up to the boss. It just kind of like presents information. So as you understand the mind, you have to see that manas is not your sense. It is this reception of your senses. It's this input and intake and output. So it's as information comes in, it sends it up, and as commands are given to it, it sends it out. And then we direct the horses in some way. So that's manas. The next one is chitta. Chitta is closely resembling the unconscious mind. So the unconscious mind is a modern psychological term. So chitta is a storehouse of merits and demerits. That is a very common statement in Eastern philosophy. It is where we store all of the things that we've done and what has happened because of them. So it's a deep well of information, seemingly bottomless well of information. Depending on your understanding of the philosophy and your, frankly, opinion, you can also see that chitta connects you to previous lifetimes as well. The next one that I want to talk about, so we have manas, we have chitta, and then we have ahamkara. Ahamkara is your sense of self. It is your ego. We use the term ego very differently in ancient psychology versus modern psychology. So bear with me here. Ego is what you interpret, or ahamkara, I should say, the Eastern ego, is what you interpret as the soul incorrectly. So it's the voices in your head and the things that you hear that you think is you, but it's not. It's things that you've been conditioned. It's the story that you've built up over time. The story, ahamkara, that's my favorite connection. That's my favorite symbolism, is that ahamkara is very close to your story because you have the ability to construct your story however you want to. The last element of your mind, or the last of the four parts, so we have manas, which is the monkey mind, it's your senses. We have chitta, which is your unconscious mind, and it's your connection to merits and demerits. And then we have ahamkara, which is your ego and your story. The last one that we have is buddhi. Buddhi is your higher mind. It is your ability to practice discrimination, judgment, and discernment. It's kind of like the man behind the curtain is what we call it sometimes. It's the decision maker of the mind. And so your decision maker in an ideal world would receive the information from manas and act accordingly. So you take input, you intake information from the outside world, and manas sends it up to buddhi, and buddhi says, hey, this looks like we should do this, and sends it back down, and manas says, okay, and does the job. That's an ideal world, but ahamkara typically builds stronger, and so does chitta, because more and more information gets stored there. So when information gets sent, a lot of times what happens is it gets a little bit intercepted by either your past experiences in chitta or in what you believe you stand for, your story, and who you are, quote unquote. Those things oftentimes marry together and they become stronger, and they overpower or intercept or become louder than the voice of buddhi. So the point of training your inner states is to coordinate them and then ultimately purify them. So as we coordinate the four parts of the mind, they work better together. We're able to intake information from the outside world and bypass your old stories as well as your experiences to make a sound judgment in the present moment with the information that's available today. If you make a judgment, if you make a decision based on old information or based on your own prejudices, those are two of the key components that happen when we fail to coordinate the four parts of the mind. Coordinating them is step one. And that's why this section is called Training the Inner States. We have to coordinate. But ultimately, we also need to work to purify them. Purifying the internal states is understanding what your story is and what limitations you're placing on yourself because of it, as well as understanding your own experiences and seeing if your experience has taught you certain things that blind you, that are creating blind spots in your current behavior. With a coordinated and purified mind, we have a stronger or maybe more direct connection with our consciousness. And ultimately, that is one of the most critical and powerful things in the Jnana yoga practice.